you go on vacation, and guess what? It goes under contract. And you need someone else, another agent, your broker, Scott, someone else to get in there and help you with, get out the signed seller's disclosure with the sellers. So we all, as admin, have the opportunity to go into your file, see it exactly as you do, pull those documents out and send them for you on your behalf. But it doesn't have to be submitted in order for us to see it. So our system looks exactly like yours. Your file looks exactly to me as it does to you. I can do everything that you can do in a file. So that's the nice thing about it, is that you've always got a backup. But I'm going to pass this out. For those of you who are here, you got it. There you go. You got it.
So you'll be able to see like our templates and all of that we prepare. I mean, just.
As far as your document templates,
Yeah.
do you want one of these done?
Yeah. Thank you.
Got it. Yes. So if it's in there, we see it. If you've got templates at the bottom, where you've put tasks and things in there, we can see those as well. So if you have a task in there that says that you're waiting for the seller to return the T47, we can see that written in there as your task and when you're going to receive it. So if we are helping you on a transaction, we can let the buyer's agent know, hey, the sellers are going to be returning this to us on such and such a date. So it's really nice for you to have those tasks, but not everybody's using them. And at this point, if you haven't learned how to use all those tasks and everything, it's not required. So that's a whole process of learning. And do you guys have any idea where to go to get to see the videos on some instruction to do some of these other things in .loop? Do you want me to show you real quick? Okay. So because I'm a real estate agent and I'm admin, I have two tabs up here. So this looks a little bit different than mine. So I always go to my office tab because it's not my transaction. There we go. And then I go into what's called the broker dashboard, which puts me in admin status. So if I have transactions, I can do transactions on my business and it's not associated to me as an admin. Okay, so this is where you go all the way. Okay, so let me put something in here. So you're going to toggle down to the bottom of the page, maybe. Okay, this is crazy. How do I open this full screen?
Do you need a mouse pad?
Well, I'm trying to toggle down to the bottom of the page. Oh, here, I'll drag the, there we go. Okay, you see where this help center is right here? Click on that help center, and you're going to be in the agent position. So you're going to click on agent, and all of these agent training are in here. So you can do the agent training, signing documents, document editors, templates. The tasks that I spoke about are in here, and they're just videos. Some of them are videos. There we go. And then some of them are just tutorials. And this one happens to be a tutorial that just walks you through the steps. Keep in mind, this is .loop and not Keller Williams. So this is a .loop portal. It's going to look like .loop. Might be just a little bit different for the Keller Williams side of it because it's not going to have the Keller Williams look and your e-edge profile and all of that. So this is just, this will take you through the steps, and that's setting up the task. And I'll show you, let me get out of here.
So where did you go? You just did a search 101?
It's at the bottom of the page, always. And I can't scroll on this page. Let me show you. I'll go back. It is at the bottom. I guess this mouse doesn't work with the roller. Yes, this is the Help Center. So it's at the bottom of every single page in dotloop. So when you're in your file, you can scroll down to the bottom if you need help with a transaction. So then I'm going to go back to a transaction. Let me just pull one up so that I can show you. So where the task, yeah, it's not going to scroll. The tasks are going to be in this section right here, and you can load the templates.
Does the arrows work for you?
Sometimes it bounces, so I don't know what it's doing.
Let me go get your mouse pad, because
It's got one.
Oh, there's one there?
Yeah. So I don't know. So anyway, that's loading your task list, and that will bring you into a list that dotloop has created for compliance, and those are tasks such as signing documents, when those need to be signed, when they need to be back, communications between the title companies and the lenders, those items. So you can set your tasks up and make it, personal for each transaction. Oh man, this is crazy. Sorry guys, I'm going to be bouncing around today.
Turn the mouse off and turn it back on, see if it'll clear something.
Okay.
That's always my
Okay.
fix. Turn things off, turn it back on. Yes. Maybe you need a new battery.
I'm not sure. Okay, so we definitely want to stay in. Yeah, it's pretty sensitive. It's bouncing around quite a bit. Today's a really good example, you guys. This is awesome. This is reality for me. So that's why I wanted everybody to come today, give you an opportunity to kind of see what my reality is. Sometimes it helps, if you know what someone else's position is and their job and what they do on a day-to-day basis, it helps you understand when we're asking for something, why that's important. And I can explain it all day long, but it's easier for you. If you're like me, I'm a visual person. I need to see it. I need to see what are you talking about, so. Oh, he's fixing it? Okay. Take a look at it. See if that's what it's doing. Well, hopefully it's not user error, because when it's someone else's technology, could be. I'd like to open that up to a big screen, but I think that because of the camera, Scott's wanting to have it on a smaller screen. I'll find out from him. So, any other questions while we're sitting here? Let's get your questions answered. And we're actually not going to start the class itself till 9, so I'm here to help you guys. Yes?
Do you live in Seattle?
I live in the eastern side of Washington State, which is Spokane. And Spokane is closer to the Idaho border, a little bit further north. So we live in the trees, pine trees in the mountains, and, well, it's not that rustic. Spokane's a pretty big city. Spokane is the same size as Austin proper, without the suburbs. So it's a pretty good sized city. Thank you, appreciate that. Oh, so the roller is working? Because it was the roller that, yeah. Because I was trying to roll down the page, and it.
It's opposite of what you're used to.
Oh.
To go down, you push up. Go up, you push down. I don't know why. It just is.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, how are you? So yeah, so we get the 4 seasons. Right now, we're getting ready to do winter. So probably January, February are our big snow months, and lots of skiers, lots of ski resorts around us, and yeah, so people love winter sports, and I don't know, for me, I just like the changing of the seasons. I've gotten really used to it, and lived here in Texas for about 17 years, I think. And when I went back to the Northwest, didn't realize I had missed the snow till we got it. And we really got it that year. I was like, okay, are you sure? So, yeah.
Does it get rainy, drizzly for a while?
A little bit in the spring and fall. And other than that, that's about it. We get nice hot summers. In fact, we had quite a few 100-degree days.
Really?
Yeah, last summer.
I think I remember that I was talking to you on that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, and we don't have a lot of houses in Spokane don't have air conditioning that were built years ago because we didn't need it years ago. So we need it now. Yeah, I have a window unit and a portable to keep my house cool. Yeah, that's crazy. But I don't have to use it that often, so.
What's that little Bavarian village thing? It's not, is that near?
Chelan.
Yes.
It's beautiful. Leavenworth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I've
Yeah,
been
it is
there.
beautiful.
I love it.
Gosh, yeah.
So,
Gorgeous country.
oh,
Yeah, in fact, they have right after Thanksgiving, I think it's the weekend after Thanksgiving, they have their big lighting Christmas thing where, you can go up there and stay in the chalets and stuff, and they light all their whole village with Christmas lights. It's
like
pretty cool.
going to, for me, like going to Austria or Switzerland.
It is, yeah, very much so.
It's mountain European.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and lots of sports. I mean, one thing I can say about people in Washington State, they're very health conscious. They are very much into riding bikes and hiking, snowboarding, snowmobiling. It's just constant sports up there. It's like golf and kayaking and canoeing, and there's just so many rivers and mountains, and all season long. Yeah, they have a lot of fun. So, yeah, there's lots to do. It's a beautiful area.
One of the most healthiest cities to live in. Or
Probably not Spokane, but
No,
the
one-
Northwest, yes.
Yes, Northwest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and it's easy to get to everywhere, too, And now there's almost a direct flight. There's a direct flight from Seattle to Austin now. So it's really easy for me to just hop on a plane to Seattle, which is a 45-minute flight, and then off to Austin, which I didn't do this time. I went to Denver instead and got the snow.
What airline does the direct from Austin to Seattle?
I know Alaska does. Southwest might be doing that now too. It was just one or two of them at the time. So Frontier used to take me from Spokane to Phoenix, and then from Phoenix to Austin, which, that's also a really short flight. So that's great. So do you guys have more questions about all of this? Yeah, good.
So
Make me
on
work.
On the templates.
Yes.
Is there a way to search for a specific template?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, let's go to
But
templates.
I know this is an area where I know I'm very inefficient.
Okay, so let's go down. I think I'm going to stand. Does that help if I stand over here? So you're always going to have personal templates that you use on certain transactions, things that you want to utilize. That's always only for you. If you want to share it with your team, you can. Then you've got risk management. Risk management are, these are PowerPoints that Avis has created to help assist you guys in answering questions about transaction details, like withdrawing an offer, how do I do that, wire transfer. Okay, there we go, Scott, thank you. Appraisals, social medias, unlicensed assistants, how do I handle those type of transactions? These are awesome. I just really appreciated Avis putting those together for us. And then I have, whoops. Okay, I'm gonna get used to this, guys, sorry.
So does that add it to the loop?
If you click this box right here
Right.
and select copy to, then it asks you, do you copy it as the .loop document, or do you want to copy it as a flat PDF where it's preserving any signatures that might be on it? And then you are going to click it to Okay, so you're never going to see two templates. Sorry, that's my admin side. You're always going to see to the loop. So when you click it and add it to a loop, then it asks you which loop do you want to add it to, and then you can create. See where it's blinking right now in that search? That's where you could type in an address and it would find your address for that file that you want, and you can add it in there. So I'm not going to do that. Let's go back. So then we've got my compliance handbook. This is all the documents that pretty much all the documents I've created and the office has created to assist you. All the checklists are in here, the paperwork policy, the ins and outs of my transactions, loop statuses, what do they mean? Agent.loop training manual is in here, managing my account, how to change my name in there, privacy steps, how to keep your client's information private. That's a very big one for me right now, especially with all the risk. So then we've got office documents like the leasing invoice, the W-9. There are a few WCID notices in here. I am adding the WCID notices that I can get a hold of in here. The MUD notices I'm not doing, and the reason why I'm not doing those is because there's about 80 or 90, and they change periodically throughout the year, and I can't manage that many on my own to handle, keeping up with all of them as the taxes are changed, the tax dollars are changing, the figures in there. So it's best to get those from the title company or from the website that is for that individual MUD district. So there's that, and then there's buyer contract documents. These are just basic documents that you might use if you were representing a buyer. Okay, so it's the same process. So let's create let's go back up here. And I'm going to create a training. I'm going to create a loop. And I'm going to name it training. Let's go training 2018. Okay, and then we're in the loop. So I want to go to my templates because I know that there's some documents that I want to add in here. So here's where those folders are again in the templates. So you don't actually have to go up into the template. You just choose this template box right here. So you're back in the templates. Let's go to the buyer contract forms. Let's say we're representing a buyer. You're going to want to put the contract checklist in there. And let's say we just want to get the buyer IBS.
Now, Mary, you could go in the search box right there.
Yes.
And find it.
Here's what I'm looking for.
That's something that
General information, notice to buyer. There it is right there. So as you start typing it, you have to know the name of it, or you have to know the TAR and TREC number, or TAR or TREC number in order to type in there. So even if you can select one section, so let's say you're looking for the on-site sewer addendum and you know that the word sewer is going to be in there, you could type in sewer and that should populate that document as well. But you have to make sure that you're in the right folder. So TAR, TREC, we don't have a folder with all documents. We just have, the individual folders, plus we have all TREC documents and all TAR documents that are in here. So there's your general information. You select that and you hit copy, and all those documents now have been populated in here. So the first time that you check open the checklist, now it's going to ask you, do you want to autofill the information that you've started? So it's going to ask you, do you want to put the information about what type of property this is? I'm going to have it autofill so you can see. Oh, didn't autofill anything for me because I didn't have anything in there. So these documents I recreate every year, or I should say I update them every year, all of the checklists, and then I send them into .loop to have them made interactive. That means that you can type in here. You could put the property address as training, since this is what this is. And this is acting funny. Okay. And then go down here and say, okay, so I know that I just got the buyer rep signed, the information about brokerage services has been signed, and the general information notice to buyer has been signed. So now you want to go up and you want to save it. You don't have to share it with anybody, just save it. You don't have to share it with me. I can see it. So that goes back to that I can see your file exactly the same way as you. So once you've saved it, all that information is now in here. So let's say I want to go back to the loop, and it asks me if I want to share. I'm going to say no, because I'll share it. If I have to share a document, then I'll share it, and I know when that is going to happen. So that's how you put all those in there. And that's on the template part of it. Is there any other questions about this while we're in here?
So basically, if you don't share it, you're not going to be like inundated with just people putting a checklist. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you wouldn't need to share it with me.
Right.
Because I'm already in there. So the only person, and the checklist isn't something that you'd really share.
Right.
The only thing you'd really share would be the IABS, the buyer rep with the buyers, to have them sign it. So you'd want to click that to share.
See, I think what I was doing was I was waiting to share when I would have the IBS done, then I would wait the agreement, and then I would share it, and you're actually supposed to share it after each document signed?
No. The only time, are you talking about submitting it to me for review? Okay. So the only time that you're going to submit it to me for review is when it's ready, when the whole file's ready.
Okay.
So you're submitting folders.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say this, all of this is signed, it's all good to go. You don't have to submit it to me for review because you're not under contract yet.
Right.
But once you go under contract, you have two choices on this particular buyer transaction. You can add the contract documents into the buyer folder that's existing right now and continue on with this folder. Or you could add a new folder, put all the contract documents in there, and submit both the buyer folder and the contract folder to us for review. So let me show you what that looks like here. You add a folder. Can you all see? Add a folder, and then you're going to go back to templates, and let's just go ahead and add a contract. Let's go with the condo resale. Okay? So now you've got two folders. You can go back in here and rename this one as the buyer folder. And this one as the contract folder. So then when it comes time, let's say everything's signed, you guys are all good to go, you're ready to submit it for review to compliance, you're going to click the submit for review, and it's always going to ask you to put in the, I'm just going to put in a, let's put Training Street. Georgetown, Texas, 78686. Okay, click next. So now it's asking you, when you submit this for review, what folder are you wanting to submit? You can click both of these folders to submit them for review. Your only options are contract and listing. So both of these pertain to a contract. So you're going to submit both of those. You never need to tell me why you're submitting because I know it's for DA, right? Because you want to get your DA. So then we click submit.
So those little notes I put in here, you don't need them?
When you leave me a note, the best note that you can leave for me is a note that tells me why you're submitting for review. If there's something in that transaction that is different than the norm, not in the MLS, Mary, the MLS sheet's not in here because we didn't put it in the MLS, or it was never listed, or we're missing the T47, it's been asked for, I put the email to the listing agent asking for it into the loop for you, but I don't know when we're going to get it. So at least then that saves me from sending the file back to you and asking you those questions, because then you've got to answer those questions and then send the file back to me, and I've got to look at the file again. So the best thing you can do is leave me a note, and that's an important, pertinent information note. You don't need to tell me that you're submitting for a review because you want your DA, because I know that. That's my job, is to get you ready for your DA. So Dotloop has added that section in there. Then they added all of the admins now receive every single message that you put in your loops. So we've all had to modify what messages we get out of your loops so that we're not inundated with 200 or 300 a day. So when I get messages from you when you change the status of your loop at the same time you send me a message. So you select submit for review at the same time that you write a message in there for me, then that message is going to come into my email. Does that make sense? Otherwise, we just get too many, and I can't get through my emails in a day to try to get into there. If there's something about a transaction that is unusual, I absolutely want you guys to let us know. Send me an email, send me a text message. Text messages are great for me because they're instant, they're quick. I can get to you quick and usually give you a quick answer back. And so, yes.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
And I had this with our last transaction, but the MUD wasn't listed, like the disclosures notice was not on the CAD. And the title company had to actually request it from the CAD. Now, I know we worked out the DA and I put in the email, but afterwards, once you actually have it signed by both parties, should I resubmit that folder so you know that that has been in compliance even after it's closed? Or? Because I know that's kind of a litigation issue.
Right. Yeah, you need to send us a message. Somehow you need to message us that in this file we've now added this document. And we are keeping track of that now on a spreadsheet and then going back into the transactions and verifying that you've added the information that was needed as well. So that's kind of a backtrack that we're doing. But right now we're a little backlogged on that because you guys are still so busy, which is awesome. I'm really happy. I mean, for this time of year, this is great. This was actually my best when I was selling real estate actively. December and January were my best months. Yes, because I think everybody else goes on vacation. So there's still a lot of people that want to buy and sell houses. So that's a good thing. Let me get you one of these sheets. Okay, next question. Did I answer all of those questions on that part?
So, for instance, just to be ahead of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I have this client and I start creating my folder and my documents in that folder.
Yes.
That doesn't work out.
Okay.
What do you want me to do with that folder?
If you have not submitted that for review, then it just stays in here. So it's always accessible to your broker, but compliance doesn't have to review it. Unless there's something about it that you'd like us to, if you want us to look it over. If a transaction terminates, then you do not have to submit it for review if you haven't already.
I had the same question. There's no way to clear it out of our loop.
Nothing in Dotloop can be deleted. Nothing in Dotloop can be deleted. You guys have to hear that because
But can it be archived?
you can archive it, but it's always still there. Okay, so documents are always in there. I tell people this because sometimes I'll see personal documents in there for people. It's like, if there's ever a breach at some point in 7 years from now, there's a breach in the system and somebody's information, I never want us holding that liability. So that's why If you can follow, especially in the leasing guidelines, if you can follow that and don't put applications in there, because what's on the applications? People's driver's licenses, social security numbers. We don't want those in the system, right? If you're going to put them in there, black them out. Black marker them if they have to be in the system. Otherwise, don't put them in there. Check copies. If you want to have a check copy in there because it's important to have a copy of that, be sure that you've blackened out their address and their account number so that we're not liable for that as well. Because I don't want us to have to come back and explain that. Driver's licenses, I'm not sure why I'm getting those in the files, but I am. Don't want copies of driver's licenses.
I didn't think you could archive a loop.
Oh yeah.
And then get the document.
Archiving a loop. So let's say, let me show you how to do that. This was a purchase. This ended up being a purchase, right? So these are the statuses that you need to put on here. And we were under contract, but now we found out this isn't going to work out. So now you go and archive it. Yeah, so it doesn't populate always in your list. But if these are the same buyers, let's say the buyers have put in an offer on this home. This is one of the nice things about having this separated in a folder. So let's say that on this condo, they decide, you know what, I don't really think I want to live in a condo. I think I want to live in a house. You terminate the offer on that condominium, and you can start a new folder and change the address of the loop to the address for the new contract that now you've executed. And I'll show you how to do that. So let's say we're going back under contract, and we no longer live on Training Avenue. You can click right here and type in. Now we're going to go to 303 Training Avenue. And then you either hit enter or save, and that's your new address. So the transaction that you started with, we can go back in here, even though you're going to archive it, we can go back in here and rename that as the main training contract folder, and then you can archive it. But if you've submitted it for compliance review, like we did on this one right here, if you've already submitted that, you need to let us know to terminate it, okay? Because we need to be able to take it out of compliance review status. You don't want us to review it, it's terminated. We can kind of see that if you put the release of earnest money and the termination documents into the loop. We already can see that when we open it, but it's best to leave us a message. Hey, this address, on this folder has terminated. It's no longer active. We won't even review it. We're just gonna leave it in the system so Avis can see it. Even if you archive it, Avis can bring it out of archive and still see it. So she can search for it, she can still find it. Let me get these handouts to you guys. Thank you, going, okay.
You're sold, right? Do you recommend that? Because I do that just to get all the contracts that aren't active away, and then I filter
Yes. Yes, you can change the status. Instead of under contract, you can change that to sold. But let me caution you, I do not review solds. There are way too many transactions in the solds for me to have those pop up in my statuses. And I'll show you here in a little bit what that means. So never change the status to sold until you have a DA. Wait till it closes. Yes, always wait till it closes, because if I haven't reviewed it and you haven't received a DA, Ryan and I will never know that that is in here, because we just can't. There's too many sold files that would populate if we were to add that to our statuses to review. It'd be crazy. So, all right, so there's that part of it. Did I kind of answer? So,
So after something is sold, do you
yes.
want to archive it just so you don't see it?
Yes. Or you can mark it sold, and then once you mark it sold, you just don't have that in your statuses for your filters.
Okay.
So if you don't have sold in your statuses for your filters, then it will never, populate those. But then if you want to go back and add that as a, because you're looking for everything, you can clear all, hit filter, and it'll bring back every single transaction you've ever participated in. So that's great. Let me show you physically. Watch. Let me show you how that works. Okay, so here's your filters right here. So right now, the only filters that I use are under this review stage. I'm doing, agent resubmitted and compliance review. Those are the only things that I look at. So then under the loop statuses, under contract and leased. So if I'm looking for a file that was accidentally put into the solds, then I could just say compliance review and sold, and I might locate it. It might populate for me. So then if I don't want any statuses on there, I want to clear everything, bring back every single transaction that's ever happened in the system. I can do that by hitting, clear all, and filter. And it'll take a while to populate. It goes back to 2007. So, yeah, this will bring back every single transaction you ever participated in, submitted or not, everything that's in there. So then if you want, once you've found the file that you're looking for, you can do whatever. You can change the status so it populates again for you, or you can go back and find documents. You can, like, let's say you're looking for an IABS that was signed last year by somebody that you were representing, and now you want to bring it back and put it into the new file. You can transfer that over by making that copy, just like you did the templates. And so now I want to go back and I want to reset my statuses again. I'm just not quite used to this, Scott. And under contract and leased and filter. Now it comes back up. Sometimes you're going to notice that when it repopulates, it's going to repopulate with the oldest transaction first, but you can change that by, like, all I have to do is come over here by sort by and click closed by again. So unfortunately, we do not have the opportunity to review your transactions by the submitted date. So whoever submitted their transactions first gets theirs first reviewed, or closing date. So we have a choice of either or. So it's because it's all located in this one section right here, we get these choices. Submitted for review, last updated, or by the closing date. So unfortunately, we used to do it submitted by review date, and there were a lot of agents that were going to closings without DAs. And so we asked .loop to give us the opportunity to do it by the closing date. They've added this feature on here. They've given us an opportunity to add the closing date in the status so that now it filters by closing date, and we can make sure that you're getting your DAs. I want an opportunity to have a look at your file before you close, because anything after closing can't be fixed. Well, 99% of the items that we need can't be fixed after closing, and crucial items might be missing. So I want to have an opportunity to catch those and get those fixed even at closing. So as you can see, we have a lot of transactions that have already closed that populate every now and again. They come back into my review stage. So this is what it looks like to me. When I get in here in the morning, this is what my list looks like. So the first thing that I usually do is I take care of anything that's been resubmitted. That means that I've sent it to the agent, said, attention agent, I'm missing documents, please add these items and resubmit. So once then it's resubmitted, it comes back and it'll say agent resubmitted. So that tells me there's just a few extra items that I need to take a look at, and then I go back through the notes of what we've asked for to make sure everything's been corrected, and I have one more last look over it before Now, unfortunately, this is being resubmitted after closing, and so crossing my fingers that, you know, everything's been taken care of at the closing table and there aren't documents that are missing. So there is a document that we use to handle that, and that's usually not something that I want you guys to sign. It's a hold harmless, where you are taking full liability for a transaction that you didn't handle correctly and get all the documentation for. So never want to ask you guys to ever have to sign that. Hopefully I never have to. So it's just one of those things that happens, and, you know, just communicate with me, let me know. You know, I've got a great assistant. She does a great job for me as well. So she works in the evenings because she works full time during the day. So, okay, what else? Yeah, so this is what my system looks like. So usually what I do is I print off this first page and I go, you know, and I write notes and check things off. So that way, as I'm going through here, you know, I know who the agent is. I'm, you know, looking for certain things. So do you guys have any questions about when I'm looking at your documents, what specifically I might need to, you know, be looking for? Yes?
So if you have a listing and you look at the property profile, the IBS, when you go to submit a contract, do you want those in the contract file too, or just leave it in the listing file?
We need it in the listing file.
Just in the listing
Yes,
file.
and you do not have to duplicate documents. So if you've got the MLS, tax records, IBS, wire fraud notice in the listing folder, you do not have to put them again in the contract folder because we've already seen them. No, no, one time. We just need one copy. So you never have to duplicate that for us, because if we need to look at it, we can still look at the listing. Even if it's been approved, we can still look at the listing side. So it never goes away for us.
I need to get you to repeat something.
Okay.
If it hasn't been approved, don't put it in what status?
Sold.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Sold status only after you've received a DA. And it's probably better to wait until after it's closed at the title company and funded. Then you can mark it sold and you'll be safe. Yeah. I never even thought about that. I never even thought that the agents would do that when we put that status in there. I understand why you guys want to mark it sold and get it out of your statuses, and I never really even... Yeah, mark it sold. Wah, yay. Status. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to not put it under sold until you've gone to close it.
Right. Or at least I've approved it and it's ready for DA. And if you change it from ready for DA to sold, Ryan will never see it.
No.
She'll never know it's ready. So it's just better to wait until you have a DA. Yeah.
Had said something about the fact that people were submitting their paperwork late.
Yeah, like this one closed on the 30th of November.
And although it's that you would review submitted first before close date. Only because people that were submitting late were putting people that are submitting.
Absolutely, that's correct. That's absolutely correct. So what Scott was mentioning was that we want to have an opportunity to look at the transactions by the submitted for review date. And the only way that I want to go back to that process is if we can't get you guys on board, because the people who are submitting their transactions on time deserve to get their DAs. The people who are not submitting until a couple of days before closing or the day before closing or after closing are taking up so much time that we don't get far enough through the transactions that have been submitted on time. And so we'll talk about all the time frames and everything And so that's one of the difficulties is if we can't get the closing date to work, we'll have to go back to the submitted for a review date. And I truly don't want to do that. I really don't. Honestly, I don't want to do that to you guys because that's not, and it's not organizational. In my mind, it doesn't make sense. But it's how this system was originally set up. So just so that you guys know, I've had a little bit of an opportunity to see what's coming down the pipeline. So I'm here because I want you guys to get the processes down, the paperwork policy down, the expectations of compliance down before the new system comes in. So that when we do the changeover, the only thing I have to train you on is training you on how to use the new system. And the new command system is going to be, yes, very organized. Yes, there is a lot of people in technology in Keller Williams who are looking at that system and trying to perfect it. And it may not be, my only thing right now is I'm trying to figure out how they're going to work it for those folks who are still old school and are not in the e-signing mode or don't have emails. That's going to be an interesting concept for how that's all going to work. Did you have a question?
Yes, if submitting a listing, do you want the listing documents in a separate folder?
Yes, please.
The actual contract?
Yes.
Okay.
I've had, pardon?
Same with buyer side?
Yes. So that transaction that I put in here, let me go back here. There it is right there. So this was the one that we were using as an example, where you've got, this is a buyer purchase transaction. So you've got your main contract folder, and then you've got a buyer folder. Now, if that contract falls out and it terminates, then you can start a new folder in here, change the address, and start with a whole new contract. So it all can just stay in here because this started out, you know, with the buyers and their information.
What if they have another transaction after this one, and they both go through? Can you put both of those in this folder?
No,
Okay.
because they're going to have different addresses. So everything that we do in the system is by address. The address is where I process. The address is how Ryan processes. Your green sheets are always by address. That's how we correspond everything together.
What's the timeline on the IABS and that if you were to have a repeat customer, we have an ambassador that we work with, how long is that? Do you have to do that for each one, or can you copy and move that into a new folder?
You can, but we like to have them signed once a year.
Okay.
So if it's more than a year old, then you'd want to get a new one.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's, I don't know that that's policy. I just think that that's how I was taught by Avis. So that's what I continue to follow. So yes.
Mary, can you go over some of the like CY documents that Keller Williams has created? For example, like the limited exposure
Sure.
form.
You got it.
That just gave me a heart attack last time. Or like other forms that if you're coming from a different brokerage, you may not know as part of this compliance.
Yes, and those are in that office folder in our templates. So that's where we'll go. Office documents. Okay, so let's start with the limited exposure since that's the one that you brought up. And I know there's been a lot of question about the information on that. So to cover ourselves in a market that is fast moving, we want to make sure that a seller understands that if for whatever reason they want to sign a listing agreement with us, but not have us put them on the MLS and market them for a period of time, we want them to understand we're willing to do that for whatever reason, you know, fixing up the house, painting, staging, pictures, whatever that is. If their home is not marketed for 5 days after they've signed or after the listing agreement begins, then a limited exposure protects us in case the market changes during the period of time that it's not marketed. So what does that mean? So that means that Right now, today, we're kind of in a mutual market. Tomorrow, or the next day, or a week from now, we could be in a seller's market. We have no way of predicting that. So their selling their home can change. We want them to understand the dynamics of that. So really, truly, that limited exposure should be signed at the same time you're signing the listing agreement. You're holding this off the market. I'm happy to do that. Here's the reasons why. Here's what we want you to know. Because we're holding it off the market, we cannot guarantee that what we've promised you today is what the market is doing, might be what the market is doing when we finally put you back on the MLS. So, or start doing marketing on your home. Does that make sense? Okay, so anytime that you start a listing, the listing start date, if there's more than 5 days from that date to the day that it's listed in the MLS, the limited exposure form is required. And let me show you.
The example Scott gave yesterday was, it's going to be 2 weeks before you actually put it on the MLS. Then a buyer comes, they sell the house, and then later on they come back and go, wait a minute,
Right.
$30,000 more for my house.
Exactly. And who are they going to blame? Even though they're the ones that wanted to hold the home off the market, they're going to come back to us and say, why did you let me do that? Why did you not tell me that was going to make a difference? And so Avis had our attorney create this document to protect us.
Is there a form for not listed on the MLS, like a coverage of, okay, they took this offer and they knew that it wasn't exposed, obviously, on the MLS and the masses, like sold before listed? I could see the same argument happening if it was
Not listed at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's a lot of investor special homes. You don't end up listing them. A lot of your folks go in and they get the offer to net what they want.
Yeah, and that goes back to the listing agreement and making sure that that's all specified in section 6, I believe, of the listing agreement. And just stipulating, seller wishes, and it stipulates. We can go through that document. I just wanted to show you guys a limited exposure first, but it does stipulate, that the sellers are requesting that their property not be listed on the MLS, and they understand the, dynamics of not having it there. So this is the limited exposure, and it's pretty basic. Seller, broker information is here. This is the property address right here. And then and I've had a lot of questions about that last blank where they say, seller hereby authorizes the broker to exclude the property located at, that's the property address, from the blank multiple listing services set forth. And you could put any, that's fine, any multiple listing services.
Oh, okay.
Okay, right, or you could put, the Central Texas MLS, whatever it is that you want to put in there. That's the discussion between you and your sellers. But the notice here is the property information submitted to the MLS also describes their price, terms, conditions, giving them information about how their listings show up online with Realtor.com, Trillia, Zillow, MLS rules. I know that this says within 2 days after obtaining all necessary signatures from the seller that it's to be put into the MLS, but I have since found out that ABOR has changed that to 5. So they are now going on what the listing agreement says. So 5 days is what we're going to do. And I really should go in there and fix that. I forgot that was still in there. So it is 5 days, even though this one says 2. Yeah. So it says the MLS rules require all participants to submit to the MLS all exclusive right to sell and exclusive agency listings for real property and vacant lots to the MLS within 2 days. So the seller acknowledges and understands that by excluding the property from the MLS, the property may not include the MLS database, Seller's property may not include the MLS's download to various real estate internet sites. Seller authorizes us to exclude the property from the MLS. This date in section 3A, the broker shall not submit the property until that date. So if you know 30 days from now is when you're going to submit that, it does not have to be an exact date. It has to be as close as possible, at least 5 days out. So 5 days or more, that can be changed. You can modify that with the line through it, change the date and an initial by the sellers of when that date's going to happen. And then it talks about fair housing, all that good information there, and everyone needs to sign. And you are the broker's associate, so you can sign for the broker. I did have some questions about that as well. Lead-based paint. I know that it says broker's signature, but you're the broker associate, and those signatures will be yours on the, same with the release of earnest money. Yes. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions about this form?
So Mary, under broker's printed name and the license number, which one do we use?
You can put Keller Williams Realty on there. You can put Avis Wucash on there. One of those two have to be in there. Yeah. Even though you're signing, you're going to put your name down below. Yeah, it's always good. We like that. Yeah, we like boxes checked. Right. So,
Then you can't be accused of forgery if that's checked.
Yeah, that too. Uh-huh. All right. Welcome. Everybody else got one. Oh, I'm sorry. What is your name?
Brad Adams.
Oh, Brad, nice to meet you. I had a transaction that we were working on. I remember. Welcome.
Hi.
I got a flyer for you here.
Thank you.
Got it.
Appreciate it.
And you are?
I'm Joseph Towns.
Joseph. Nice to meet you, Mary.
You too.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That's going to...
When the new system comes out, are they gonna error proof it to help us keep from missing those little checks, like if we write the right section, it'll all the way through?
I don't know. I don't know. Yes, I know. I get to go to family reunion, and I'm going to just spend all my time in labs. I really want to learn the system for you guys. I don't know that they'll have the full system out to where I can play with it, but I'm crossing my fingers that they're going to have a little bit of something so I can start checking it out.
What's the new system?
Command.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. Yeah, the new system would be command.
When does it activate?
We don't know.
Oh, we don't.
They have not come out with a projected start date yet. I'm just excited. Part. I don't think so. I think it's going to be fully e-signature capable. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Issues with other people with not within Keller Williams? You know what I'm saying?
I honestly, I can't tell you. I really don't know. All I know is that people like you and I are the ones that are helping to create this with the technology team. So they have the same questions, the same concerns, the same needs that we do. So I'm sure they're on it because they're using the system just like we are. They want it to be fully integrated. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I don't know what will be obsolete. I don't know what we'll use, what we won't until, it comes out and we get a chance to play with it. I'm hoping that we're going to get an opportunity to maybe test pilot it, but who knows? But I'd sure like us to, especially the Georgetown office. I'd really like you guys to be able to pilot it. We'll see. So any other questions? I think we should get started and go through the sheet that I created for you guys. I created this because, as some of you got an opportunity to see this morning, we have a great deal of documents in the compliance handbook. And there is actually a handbook coming. I've created an actual compliance handbook for all of you. It's about 30 pages altogether, and I'm not sure when that's coming. Yeah, but it's all the documents, all of the important documents for the compliance side of things. And I don't know if I think they're integrating it into a software system, so it'll be online. So all of you can review it online. But right now I'm just waiting to hear how that's going. So Rachel is graciously taking it and running with it. So it's pretty exciting. This, however, I wanted you guys to have a page of just the important basics so you can know what it is compliance really wants. And those of you who were here a little earlier, I showed you what compliance looks like from my point when I click in every single day to look at documents, or PJ. I don't know if you all know PJ. PJ's our assistant compliance. She does your compliance in the evening time, so yeah. She hasn't seen this yet, so she doesn't know what we're doing today. All right. So these are the basics. Paperwork policy, steps for my transactions. This is not a substitute to the original documents. And I want you to know that the ALC approved the paperwork policy, and they put that into the policy and the office policy guidelines. And so it took me and Avis probably about 3 years to get that honed in and get the ALC to agree to it so that we could have this compliance department and have our paperwork policy as policy for the office as well. So on the paperwork policy, let's go ahead and pull that up while I'm here. It is Paperwork Policy 2018. Now we could go through here and read all of this, or we can look at the summary I created for you. So, per our agreement with Avis, to hold your license, you must provide all signed documentation into our file server. .loop is currently our file server. That means everything that you have signed with one of our clients, whether it terminated, whether it went through, needs Avis's needed a copy of that within 72 hours of that being signed. It should be in a file. Okay, so start a file, put those documents in there. That does not mean you have to submit for review yet. So let's finish looking at that. Listings in a file within 72 hours of signing those listing documents. Submit for review within 72 hours of signing or within 24 hours of activating in the MLS. So what does that mean? 72 hours, the documents have to be in a file. You do not have to submit for compliance review if you haven't put it in the MLS yet. You know you're still waiting for a T47, but once you've put it in the MLS, within 24 hours of putting it into the MLS, compliance needs to have a copy of that, okay? So it has to be submitted for review. Listing agreement changes should always be made on an amendment to the listing. Does anybody know why that? Once we have a signed agreement, it's always better when you're changing that original agreement, it's always better to do that on an amendment. That's what it's created for. And that keeps a good track record of this is the original, what was agreed upon, and here are the changes. So the agreed upon is the listing agreement. The amendment is the changes that are being made to that original listing agreement. And you can add other things on there too if you need to. Termination or withdrawals are done on an amendment to the listing, and the amendment is added to the file and sent to Avis or Donna to withdraw from the MLS. Okay, they'll withdraw that from the MLS for you. All right, contracts need to be all signed documents within 72 hours after executing a contract along with the signed buyer documents, submitted for review within 72 hours of execution or at the latest 24 hours after the option expires. So this is where those tasks comes in, where we were talking earlier about the tasks. You can set yourself a task that this is the date the option expires, submit my transaction for review. That can be your task. So you'll get a notification that your task is come due, and it will say submit your transaction for review. And bless you. And so that's a really good example of what types of things you could set tasks for. If you're not good at it, write yourself a note, put it on your phone. Something has to notify you that I need to have that transaction submitted. At the very latest, 24 hours after the option expires. So if the option expires December 11th, we better have that in for compliance review by the 12th. Okay? Change. Yes, submitted for review. 72 hours the documents have to be in the file, but 24 hours after option is the very latest you should ever submit for review. Okay? Changes made to an executed contract should also be on an amendment. That's what the amendment was created for. So we have an original executed receipted document as is. Everything that you want to make changes, any changes that you'd like to make to that should always be done on an amendment. So let's say that you have a sales price of $200,000 and you have your buyers are going to be financing $90,000. So something happens where that changes in the negotiations and the financing amount is now going to have to be $95,000. What do you want to do to modify the third-party financing? You don't really want to modify the third-party financing because that's the original document again. So you can do that on the amendment to the contract, changing the sales price, changing the finance price, and notate in the additional informations on there, the special provision area, notate on there that you're going to be changing the financing amount on the third-party finance, on the original third-party financing, and that all the other details on that third-party financing are to remain the same. So what does that do? Solidifies the percentage, solidifies the years that the original loan was agreed to, and the only thing that's changing is the financing amount. So now you've specified that to the seller. Any questions on? Okay.
What about like just errors? Like we get a contract, we're reviewing it, it's totally executed, and it's got a checked not in the HOA, but there's an HOA addendum and it's in an HOA. Errors, do you want that in an amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So all changes, any modifications to the original document as is. The good track record is that if you do that on the amendment, we know what the original always was.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're leaving everything original. Every change is going to be done on an amendment. There's now an amendment to the seller's disclosure. There's now an amendment to the buyer's representation agreement. I don't know if you guys knew that. So if for some reason the sellers are under contract and they get a copy of a buyer's inspection report and something has now been brought to their attention about their home they didn't already know, they can do this update to the seller's disclosure form to update the next buyers. All right, so same thing with the buyer's representation agreement. So while we're talking about contracts, I want to bring up one thing that's very confusing. You never want to negotiate your commission in special provisions of a contract. That is, you are not a party to the contract, so you should not be in there. The only place that you could modify the other broker, if you're the listing broker, you could modify the commission amount on page 9 of the contract. However, if you have a buyer representation agreement and you're going to modify the agreement between us and our buyers, you want to make sure that you're modifying that buyer's rep agreement. It is between us and our buyers. Same with the listing agent. Their agreement for commissions is between them and their client, and we are not a party to that. So we secure our commissions on page 9. If that changes, then we need to make a modification on page 9. Otherwise, if, let's say, the buyers decide that they're going to pay our commission because they want to get help with their loan, they'll pay our commission, whatever their reasons are for paying our commission, we can go back and modify by using the amendment to the buyer's representation agreement, we can modify the commissions section of that buyer rep that they'll now be paying our commission. And how much? We'll want to make sure that we specify that as well. Yes?
Do that for when there's a builder incentive, change from 3 to, they're paying 5% or something like that?
That's between us and the builder. Okay? And they have a form for that. Usually it is the agreement with the broker. The agreement to broker form, they will usually specify that on there. So that's between us and them. That should never be on the purchase agreement between them and our buyer.
So you would put 3 in there, in that box, even if you're getting 5?
Is your, in your buyer's agreement?
How would you do that?
Well, you would do the buyer's agreement before you even had a.
Right.
Anyway, so it's gonna be 3.
Right.
But it is on a lot of the builder contracts. If they're paying 5%, it's on the contract with the buyer.
Yeah, each builder contract is a little bit different. So usually there's a broker section either in the contract or they have a separate document. Yeah, I mean, yeah. And truly, the buyer rep agreement only comes into play if we're going to go back. If for some reason the seller's not paying our commission and we're going to go back and get our commission from the buyers. That's the only time. Would you go back to your buyers and expect them to pay 5% commission? Probably not. Yeah. So there wouldn't have to be any changes made to the buyer rep agreement and under those circumstances. But yeah, normally the builders, well, there's supposed to be an agreement to a broker agreement, but I have been seeing that some of them have been in the body of, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Good question.
So one other question on that. Are you talking about on where, I don't remember what the front is, and then it's got like the sentence in line, broker, blah, blah, buyer will pay blank percentage. That's a lot of times blank.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody said, well, it doesn't matter because it's what on the MLS anyways, that really matters. Is that true?
Okay, so if you stop and read that section, let's pull it up, because that's a really good question, but you guys have to read that question because what it's asking is if in the instance, let's see, if for any reason, oh, I don't remember, hold on. Sorry, I have a little mouse issue today. I'm not used to going backwards. Okay. The parties agree that the broker will receive a commission calculated as follows. 0% of the gross sales price if the client agrees to purchase the property in the marketing area. The client agrees also for the lease. So a person is not obligated to pay a broker a commission, and I'm down here in the earned and payable, until such a time the broker's commission is earned and payable. The client enters into a contract to buy or sell a property in the marketing area. The client breaches his agreement. The broker's commission is payable either during the term of the agreement, client's breach of contract, or buy a lease property in the marketing area. Client's breach, if a client acquires more than one property under this agreement, the broker's commissions for each property acquired are earned as the property is acquired. So the source of payment under Section B, the broker will seek to obtain payment of the commission specified in paragraph 11A, first from the seller, the landlord, or the agents. If such person refuses or fails to pay the broker the amount specified in Section A, the client will pay broker the amount specified less any amounts the broker receives from each person's. So if 3% is what is agreed upon, then 3% is what you would want to have in Section A as the percentage that we would expect our buyers to pay. I have some agents that are leaving it blank because they say that they would never go to a buyer and ask for a commission. I don't think that's good practice, and that's not how I want you guys to look at this. I understand that there are going to be certain circumstances where there's a tricky situation going between the buyer and the seller, and we really need to make sure that you protect yourself for the hard work that you've put in. You work hard, you deserve to be compensated. And if you can't be compensated on the seller's side, you want to make sure that if it reverts back to your buyer's representation agreement, that you've solidified how much you'll be compensated for. So you don't want to have to go back to the buyers and say, okay, so the sellers are not going to pay my commission. Are you going to pay it? Because I didn't put anything in there. Would you now sign it and tell me that you'll pay me commission? That's going to be a very difficult conversation. If you get it up front, then you can go back and read that section to the buyers and say, you know, you've agreed to pay my commission if the buyer or the sellers do not. And, you know, whether there's negotiation at that point, you know, that's probably something that I would bring Scott or Avis into to help, or Kristen as well, to help bring you into good communications through that tricky situation. So,
Quick question.
yes.
So would you suggest that we keep 3% for both sides there, and then do a broker to broker between us and the other brokerage or the builder for that additional 2%? Like, let's say it wasn't in their contract, right? Because I don't know what everyone else's feelings, but it'd be kind of horrible to charge somebody 5% should the deal go bad versus keeping that 3% and then having a broker to broker with that other party.
Right. Well, so if it's on the contract that they're going to pay you an additional 2% commission, you know, with your 3%, so you're going to get 5% commission. If that's already on the builder contract, realtor agreement section, then you don't have to worry about that additional 2%. As long as you've got your 3% on here, I would absolutely not charge anyone more than 3%, unless they agreed to it ahead of time. But charging them the standard 3% would be normal. You're right.
In the case of like a bonus, like let's say Scott's going to offer me a bonus, right? Do I send him, and let's say for this instance he's with Coldwell Banker, do I send him a broker to broker because he advertised the $3,000 bonus?
If it's advertised on the MLS, it's guaranteed, right? So that's that, and he should have that in Section 9 of the contract. That should be listed in Section 9 of the contract where your commissions are designated for the other broker.
Okay.
Yes, he would want to put it in. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Now, let's say that a property is not listed in the MLS, then you would absolutely do a broker-to-broker agreement, because that solidifies that you're going to get paid. Otherwise, there's no agreement, because there's not been any advertisement of what that commission is going to be. And don't assume, right? Got it. So, yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
So, say in the MLS something's listed at 2.5, but on the contract we have 3, and they agree upon 3. The contract is the binding amount, or is it the MLS listed fee?
I would probably back that up with something in writing with the other agent, with the listing agent.
So
I would just send them an email and say, hey,
from the contract
yes,
itself.
yes. I would just say, you know, hey, I just want to make sure that we're both in the same understanding that although the MLS says 2.5% and the contract has stipulated 3%, that we are going to be receiving 3%. And then that reply, then make sure that you put that email into the file. So we have a good track record.
I want to see that reply.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I didn't notice, or something.
Yes, yes, right. And bonuses as well. So let's say that there's a bonus if you can execute a contract prior to a certain date. I've seen those on the MLSs. It's like a $1,000 bonus. So you put 3% plus $1,000 per MLS. And that's how I would write that in Section 9 of the contract. So you're stipulating that right there. Okay? All right, so termination and release of earnest money on a contract. Documents need to be uploaded into the file, and the file needs to be resubmitted for review if a DA has been created. If it's submitted for compliance review and I open up a file and I see a release of earnest money and a termination of contract, I'm going to terminate that folder for you. If the release of earnest, if you've received a DA, I will have no way of knowing that that's terminated. So by resubmitting that transaction to compliance review, then we'll see that the DA was created, it's now terminated, we need to terminate the DA, and we can send notification to Ryan to go ahead and terminate that DA for you. It's a good flow of how, it's not really how it's been happening, so I wanted to make that clear to you guys. That's the best way to do it. Just keep everything in dot loop, let us know this is terminated, we'll have Ryan terminate the DA for you, so that you're just communicating within your file, and then we can communicate within your file as well to Ryan. Or you can send us both a message and say, hey, this is terminated, can you terminate the DA? And Ryan and I will both get that. Just make sure that you resubmit that transaction for compliance review. Top section of the checklist can be auto-populated. Okay, so let's not go there yet. Simple, easy steps for a transaction. You start a new loop. If you
Where is that? Oh, I see.
right, so if you start a transaction, and I'm gonna start calling them files, because really it's a file folder. Think of a filing cabinet. You have file folders within a cabinet, and you can have multiple folders within a file. So we're going to go filing cabinets because it's going to be easier as we transition out of dot loop instead of calling them loops, because it's not going to be loops anymore. So let's go ahead and just kind of follow along with these steps. We process everything by address. So what happens if you start a loop with John Smith? Because all you're doing is getting the buyer documents at this point signed. You want to make sure that you go back and you change the address on that loop when you are now under contract for a property with a property address. So that property address will now be on there. You can leave the buyer's names on there as well, but we need to have the property address. Compliance does everything by property address. Transactions are all based on an address. Pretty much, and Ryan also looks for your green sheets by address and creates your DAs by address. So everything is address driven, and it's going to stay that way. So it's really a good idea to get into that habit. Steps to follow on submitting for review. The statuses under the file name are extremely important. And this is how I find your transactions. Yeah, don't laugh, PJ. So these are the statuses: listing for sale, under contract, and the closing date. Those three statuses are the most important statuses to have on your file. We want to know what type of transaction it is. We want to know, is it under contract? Or is it a purchase, or is it a lease? And we want to know what date does it close, or what is the move-in date for a lease. So these are the statuses that we go on when we pull up your transactions to start reviewing. Selecting a transaction type, you're going to select purchase for a contract, listing for a sale or lease. Selecting the loop status, under contract would be the only choice in order for you to receive a DA. Remember, we talked about the sold. We're not going to put it under sold status until we've received our DA or the property is closed. Adding the closing date for a lease, this is your move-in date. So the first day of the when the lease starts. So on the lease agreement, that's that start date. So that's the date that you want to put in there. Click Submit for Review, and that's this section up at the top. Let's look at this one. Up here, Submit for Review. Once you click on Submit for Review, okay, this mouse is not happy with me today. Oh, there we go. Then basically it's going to ask you, is this a contract or is this the listing side that you're submitting for review? Oh. So you might have a folder that's for all the listing documents and a contract in a different folder, which is what we prefer. Because we can approve your listing side and not your contract side while you're still working on contract documents. So make sure that you label that appropriately. So if it's under contract, you want to make sure that you've labeled this as a contract and submit to us as a contract for getting your DA. Add the closing date. Okay, so Click Submit for Review, choose the labels for the folder, contract or listing. Buyer documents should also always be labeled as a contract on the contract side. Now the question is, what do we need in a file? Is there anything that I can answer for you guys before we move on to this section?
I just have one quick question about
Okay.
the disclosure.
Disclosure.
Yeah, seller's disclosure.
Okay.
So there's an amendment to seller's disclosure. If they share the inspection with your client, let's say I have the seller,
Mm-hmm.
do you have to do an amendment to what was disclosed? Because now they're aware before it closes, or no? Because that seems a little crazy to me. So
Let me see if I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
So you're asking me if your sellers have received, if you're the listing agent, your sellers have received a copy of a buyer's inspection report, and now they're aware of additional information. Is the buyer aware of that information?
yes, so the buyer initiated the inspection, the buyer's inspection. They shared it with you.
You would amend that original seller's disclosure if for any reason that original contract with that buyer terminates. So if it terminates and you're relisting the property, now you want to inform a new buyer. The existing buyer already knows because they had the inspection,
Okay.
right?
If it's terminated.
Right, yeah. So if it terminates, you want to make sure you're giving that information to a new buyer. So let's go into my compliance handbook page and take a look at, backwards, Mary, backwards. Contract checklist. So we're going to take a look at documents that we need in a file. The top section, if you guys see this is always really good information up here. It can be auto-populated in a file once you've started it. But what I want you to look at, required documents to receive a DA. Okay? Those are documents that you should almost always, in most transactions, be able to check mark all of these, that you have added every single one of these into the file. And as you can see, it's interactive. So you can check mark them, you can make notifications, let us know over here if for some reason. You can type in here, not listed, not in the MLS, whatever, just real brief, type in something to let us know the information. Otherwise, we're going to send the file back to ask you for that information because we really can't get our eyes on it and get a good feel of the file without the MLS and the tax records. Those are primary of really, and honestly, I've been sending files back and not necessarily looking at everything else in there because I really can't get a good picture without the MLS. And if it's not in the MLS, then there's other things that I need to be looking for. So I usually will send it back and ask the agents to add the MLS and the tax records. And then when it comes back into compliance review, then I'll review everything together when we have all the full information. So these are the primary things that you should be able to almost check off on every single third-party financing, obviously, Survey T47. Just notate, I mean, you don't have to tell us if there's not a third-party financing addendum because we're going to see that on the contract that it's a cash deal. So that's fine. If the T47 is for some reason you're having troubles getting it from the listing agent, just put on there, ask listing agent. Or waiting to receive, or some type of notification in there so that we don't send your file back to you looking for that document when you have information that you could provide to us to keep us from making that change.
And I'll say a note to that too. If you have in a contract that the seller's going to be providing the survey to the buyer within like a certain amount of days, that first box, and then you end up having to buy a new one because the owner's not going to approve it or the title can't read it, put a note in there to us saying that you've ordered a new one.
Yeah.
That you're not going to get it until closing because that's normal. And we'll submit, we'll approve your file and just say after closing.
Make sure you put it in there, right?
Right. Yeah.
And we have a list that we keep track of on transactions when we know that we've asked you for something that's not going to come until closing. We have a list that we're keeping track of all of those. We haven't scrubbed in a while. Yeah, but it'll get there. So the other additional documentation is based on what might come up in a different transaction. So let's say you're selling a property, or your buyers are purchasing a property in Austin, and it qualifies for the Austin energy audit. We need to make sure that that's noted in there and you've added a copy in the file. These are extra reminders as you're coming through here to go, oh, this is an intermediary. I don't know if we did an intermediary form. Let me check with the other agent, right? So this is your checklist before you submit for review. Check these over. Make sure that you've got everything that you know is needed in the transaction. Mark and leave us notes on things that you know that we don't. We're not privy to, your communications between agents and between clients, so we need you guys to give us that information. All right, and supplemental documents would be like an amendment to repairs, buyer walkthrough acceptance forms. Are they required? No, but there are supplemental documents that you might have in a transaction. They may be important to you. Compliance may not have to look at the buyer walkthrough. So, those are just reminders for you that those items are in there. So check mark everything you've got in there. Notice of termination of contract, and it does say resubmit your loop. So make sure that you're resubmitting your loop if you add terminated documents in there. Okay? Any questions about the checklist? Yes.
So the way those are lined up, do you want them in separate folders that way in that order?
Nope. You can have separate folders for additional items that aren't required and separate folders for the contract. It's very difficult for compliance to open up a file and have 50 documents in a folder. Right. And I'm not kidding you that happens. So if you're submitting for review the folder that has just the required documents for compliance review, that's perfect. That just means send us what you know is required, and the rest of it can just be additional items that you do not have to submit for review. So you can you can have as many folders as you want, but the main thing for us is that you submit for review the one folder that has the documents that we need. Yes, yeah. Yeah, because sometimes you'll have 3 or 4 copies. You'll have a buyer-signed copy of a contract. You'll have a fully signed contract that doesn't have an executed date. You'll have an executed date, copy of the contract. And then you might have a receipted contract that has the receipted page but not the executed page. So we just need to have one full contract. And so we're not looking at so many of them. Folders, I mean, if you put a whole bunch of stuff in different folders, don't feel bad if you're submitting it all for review. Just, do it.
I'd rather you submit it than not.
Yes. Yeah. Does that help to answer your question?
Yes, I just had a question about, is there a particular order that you want?
Oh, I'm sorry, order. You know what, if it's all in there, really? I reset my order for how my brain functions, because I've been doing this for so many years that I learned it a specific way and I'm still doing it. I'm going to set it up exactly the way that my eyeballs need to see it, because I'll be able to trigger right from the start. There have been times where I'll look at a file and I'll be laying in bed at night going, there's something missing. I got to go back to that file, because it's just inbred in my mind, that there's a process that I'm looking at these. I think I'm going on 11 years of doing this. So after a while, you get a pattern, a habit. I can look at a document and know right away if there's a missing box that needed to be there that isn't checkmarked. And it's just because you get trained that way. And the same thing for PJ. I mean, she'll know immediately, okay, we need to go back on that one. So just put them in there and don't worry about lining them up. If you want to do it because it helps you, by all means.
If you see your stuff moved around, it's probably because we were moving it
So.
around. So.
Yeah. We've moved things around. We've collapsed your files. Okay, so let me go back and let me tell you what that means. If you ever open up your file and one of your folders looks like just populated. Where'd it go?
I think just take the numbers away.
Okay, there it is. Crazy. Okay, so if you open, let's say compliance review has been through your file, you open up, geez, I'm sorry guys. Okay, you open up your file and one of your folders looks like that. And you go, where'd all my documents go? It's because we're trying to stack things that makes it easier for us to take a look at. And so all you have to do is click that folder name again and they'll repopulate. We've just collapsed it to try to just get in front of us what we need to look at.
And you can also move the files around like, in different order.
That does not work on your phone, by the way. And if you drag and drop a document from one folder to another and put it in the wrong place, and all of a sudden you can't find it, that happens. It has happened to me twice now. It goes into an old archive folder, and it's like, it doesn't even appear. So I don't really know why that happens, but up here you would see the show archived. I would click the show archived, and then it gives you a search bar. I would type in whatever the name of that document was, and you'll find it. And then you can repopulate it back into the folder that you wanted. But yeah, I think that was one of the little glitches that dotloop had, giving us the opportunity to drag and drop, because we weren't ever able to drag from one folder to another, and now we can. So I think that was a little glitch in the system. I'm not sure they'll correct it. So. Okay, any questions about that before I move on?
The checklist, is it updated for 2019?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I usually get those out by the 1st of February. So.
You will have new requirements.
And the only thing, what I keep reiterating to you guys is the general information form and the inspector information form. Those two documents I really want us to start including. So we haven't heard back from Avis about the seller's disclosures yet, so I'm getting us ready in case that comes up, and the general information. Here's my thinking on that. Buyers really need to get back to the buyer beware. Know the property that they're purchasing. Don't rely so much on your agent and the information provided, right? So if we're using the TAR or the TREC seller's disclosures and there's less information than there is on the TAR one, the buyer really needs to be aware of what they're purchasing. They're putting good money down on a property. They need to know that property and know what they're purchasing. So I'm trying to I don't want to release us from our responsibility at all. We have a very big responsibility here, but I want the buyers to hold that responsibility with us, because they're the ones that are purchasing it. So I think that will help if we can make sure that they read the general information form and really take a good look at it. I think that will help them going forward on making sure that they're a little more aware. Protecting us as well, a little bit more. So sharing the responsibility with our buyers, I think that will help. And the inspector information, I highly recommend everybody get an inspection. Inspection. So, and got a septic inspection, right? Yeah, even new builds. I'll tell you a story about a new build. I was friends with a gal who used to work for a lender. Her and her husband were purchasing a brand new built home in Cedar Park. And she called me on the phone and she said, is there anything that you can recommend to me? We've never purchased a new home before. And I said, yeah, have an inspection. And she goes, oh, the builder's going to do one. Have a third-party inspector come out on your behalf that you pay and make sure that happens. Well, probably about a month later, she called me on the phone and she said, do you want to know what you saved my family from? Remember that really bad windstorm? She goes, well, we had a third-party inspector come out and the joists in the roof were not put in properly. Had we have just gone through that windstorm that we just had, we would have completely lost the panels of our roof, like roof blown off, because they were not attached to the joists properly. So, so anyway, that's just food for thought. Why would you wait until something like that happens to have the builder come back on their 10-year warranty and hopefully fix it and put your family through uprooting you from that home that you've just purchased, when you could have another inspector go in there and take a look at it prior to that? So I just, yes. And they're, yes, because they're working for you. You know, and that's the whole idea. They'd be working for our client. Highly recommend it. So that inspector information form says, do you want that the buyers are going to or are not going to have an inspection? Please be sure that they mark that. Not just sign it. They need to mark whether they're going to or not. We want to know. So that way they've been provided the information that they should. If they choose not to, then that helps to cover us as well.
So do we need it if they are going to have an inspection, or do we only need it if they're not?
I would have them do it irregardless. It is one of those forms that as soon as you write up an offer on a home, I would include that document into the buyer, into those contract documents. That's when I would have that signed. Okay, you guys are making an offer on a home. I want to make sure you understand the importance of having that home inspected. So have them sign it at that point in time, because they might not know, you know. But if you tell them how important it is, at that point, they can start getting that into their mind. Oh yeah, I really do need to have an inspection. Not at the buyer, not at the signing of the IABS and buyer rep forms. That's probably too soon. They really need to have an idea of a home in mind. So when they go to put in an offer, that's the best time to explain it. An address, yes. It's best. And there is a section in there that's kind of an open section. If you wanted to provide names and phone numbers of 3 inspectors, not 1, not 2, 3 at the most, or at the least. So you have to have at least 3 inspectors, and you can't tell them who they can choose. They have to be able to make a contact with that inspector, talk to that inspector, and whoever they feel the most confident with, they can choose. Otherwise, you could go to the TREC website. They have a whole list of qualified inspectors that all have been qualified through TREC. So there's an entire, I think it's 5 or 6 pages of inspectors, might be more. So you can always go in there, print that off for them, or give them the website. They can pull it off, because you don't have to be an agent to pull that information off of there. And they're all licensed, so it's really important. Okay, does that cover all of that part? All right, so then file statuses. I just wanted to review a little bit about what those statuses mean. So let's say right here, it's your folder. So if you contact me by text message or by phone and you say, hey Mary, I don't know if you've taken a look at my file yet. Can you get me ready for DA? I'll ask you, what is the folder status? Is it in for compliance review? Is it ready for DA? So I want you guys to kind of understand what those mean. So the compliance review means that you've submitted it for me to review, and it's just waiting. It's in my queue for review, and PJ and I will take a look at that as we can, based on your closing date. Attention agent, please review not compliant. That's when we send it back to you. We've looked at it. There are some items that we need. A lot of times, if there's more than one item that we're going to need, we'll put a checklist in your folder. If you haven't already, we'll put a checklist in there and start marking up the checklist of all the items that we need, and specifically what we need on there. So if you had a checklist in there and you guys could be utilizing that, then we can go in there and we'll put a tag on there that'll say, please review the checklist for items needed, and we highlight it in yellow, the things that we put in there for you that we need. Usually if it's an MLS that you're missing, we'll just type in the word need and highlight it in yellow and save it, and then tell you to go to the checklist for the items that we need. So items that are needed to complete the file, and a message has been sent to you in the file, please resubmit once it's complete. So if I'm asking you for a buyer rep agreement, or asking you to go in there and sign it, or asking that we get a wire fraud notification, or one of the documents is missing, I'll send the file back to you. If you don't put the documents in there and resubmit it for review, we don't have any way of knowing that it's ready for us again, that you've done what we've asked you to do and now it's ready for us to approve. The only way to know to do that is for you to resubmit it, okay? Agent resubmitted means that you've added the items and you've resubmitted it for review. This status will go from attention agent to agent resubmitted. Agent resubmitted are the ones that usually are the first transactions that we'll take a look at when we start our day. As you see, they populate to the top of the list usually, but it's still based by the closing date. Okay, so ready for DA. So if you call me looking for your DA and I ask you what the status is and it says ready for DA, then I'm going to tell you our part's done. Compliance has approved you. You're good to go on our end. You're just waiting for Ryan to review your green sheet and create your DA, okay? So that's how you kind of know. Do I contact Mary? Do I contact Ryan? Who do I call? How do I know? Look at your file. If it says, and you can, when it's stacked like this and you go into your file, you can see right there what the folder status says. So if the folder status says ready for DA, who are you going to call? Right. Exactly. If it says compliance review or attention agent, who are you going to contact? Awesome. Perfect. What if it says needs green sheet?
You've got some work to do.
That's absolutely correct. That means that Ryan went to do your DA after I approved the file and your green sheet wasn't complete. So she was not able to create your DA. So until your green sheet is complete, she can't create that for you. So who are you going to call? Right. Well, actually, the thing you're going to do is you're going to resubmit that file. As soon as you create that green sheet, you go back in and resubmit it for review, and guess what happens? The status is going to change to ready for DA. So when Ryan goes to do the transactions ready for DA, she's now going to find your green sheet, right? So it's that automatic process that if you resubmit it to Ryan, and if you want to add a copy of the green sheet into the file, you can do that and just tell her, hey, you know, I completed it, write her a message in the message box, and just resubmit your file, and it'll say ready for DA again. You guys will be ready to go. Combined listing sale ready for DA. What does that mean? That means that you have one folder with all your listing and all your contract documents in it. We've reviewed it, and both sides of the transaction are ready. And now the DA can be created. So that's a little different. It's the same thing as saying that it's ready for DA, but it has a listing attached to it, which means Ryan needs to make sure that she activates that listing in the system and then creates your DA. So that's a two-step process for her. All right? It's not really how we like it because it's complicated when you're looking at a folder with all listing and contract documents in one. But at this point, just do the best you can. That's what we're asking. Yes?
Farm and ranch, do you need a inspector information form or just it's contract?
Inspector information form would be really important on a farm and ranch if there's a septic, if there are any buildings, farm, branch, nothing, flat land, nothing, no improvements whatsoever. Okay, then no. Why? Yeah. No, that was a good question, because on farm and ranch sometimes you just, you don't really know. But yeah, if there's never been a building, there isn't a building, there's no septic, there's no improvements whatsoever, flat land, yeah, no inspector information needed. Okay, so if you ever get in here and you see that one of your folders has been notated as a duplicate, it says duplicate file. I should change that to duplicate folder. It just means that you've submitted more than one folder, and the second folder that you submitted, I can only approve one. So if I can only approve one, the other one I got to label as something because you've put it in for compliance review. So I'm going to put duplicate folder. Or additional information is basically the same thing. Or if you submitted two files, one of your files is going to have a status of duplicate, and the other file could have a status of ready for DA. So some agents forget that they've submitted a file to us already, and then they submit another file to us, and we get two of the exact same files, and so we can only approve one. Otherwise, Ryan would start to wonder about us. Okay, approved buyer documents. So in the instance that I have been showing you on that training transaction, if you start with your buyer documents in a folder and then add another folder for the contract documents, we will add the status on the buyer documents to approved buyer docs. So if everything looks great on all your buyer documents, that's how we'll label that folder. And then the additional one I already talked about. Do you guys have any questions about those statuses? Where to find them? You know who to contact? All right. What items does compliance look for in a file? Dates on documents. It's a big one. Should your buyer's representation agreement be signed by the buyers on November 1st if a contract was executed on the 15th of October? Yeah. Yeah, all the time. Yeah. So your buyer's representation agreement should not be signed on the 1st of November if you executed a contract with that buyer the middle of October.
Oh.
That means that, oops, I forgot to get that document signed, and you go back and do it. Because let me tell you what will happen. And this may I don't want to stress you, but I want to tell you that compliance's main purpose is to keep you out of court. So if you're standing before a judge and a judge says to you, well, you didn't have a buyer rep agreement. Oh, yes, I did. Well, I see that they signed it on November 1st, but the contract was executed on the 15th of October. You didn't have a buyer representation agreement. To the garbage that would go. Mm-hmm. So that's like not having one. We don't ever want that to be the case, so we're trying to get you guys in good habits. IBS, TREC requires the first meeting with a client discussing purchasing a home and using you as an agent. That's the first document signed. Sign the buyer rep at the same time if you know you're going to be taking them out looking at properties. If the buyers go, well, I'm not paying your commission, fine, exit out that part and initial it. They can refuse that part. They can, exit out that section if they don't like it. They don't like the verbiage of it. They don't want to pay your commission. Okay. Exit that part out. Have them initial it. But initial and sign the rest of it because we're representing you. And I had my insurance agent years ago when I was selling homes, a farmer's agent. She told me, tell the buyers that if I'm going to drive you around looking at properties, your insurance agent wants you to have a buyer's representation agreement because that's your representation. Because if you're in an accident with a client in the car, your insurance company is going to say, do you have a representation agreement that shows that you were using your car for business? Yeah, here's my buyer rep. And if it was signed after the date that you had an accident with them in your car, what is the insurance company going to say? Out it goes, right? So watch your dates. Watch the dates that you're having things signed. Same thing with the listing agreements.
It's also to make sure that they're not going to go sign with somebody else. If you're going to spend time with them, secure that agreement.
Yeah, it's a representation agreement. It's a commitment between them and us to represent them in a transaction.
What would happen in the insurance if you had a car accident with the person in the car?
I don't know. You'd have to ask your insurance company that question. Yeah, I don't know. That was just something that, because it's a struggle to get buyers to commit to that buyer rep. You're committing to me. You're committing to my broker, But there's a lot of buyers that are like, yeah, I'm not ready to do that yet. Okay, but if I'm going to drive you in my vehicle, my insurance company requires it. So, that's
good.
Yeah. Yeah, and have this discussion with your insurance company and ask them, is there anything else that I could be doing? If I'm driving a buyer in the car, is there anything else that I could be doing to protect myself? So that's a good question for you to discuss. But that was just something that my insurance agent had mentioned to me. And so, what's that?
The buyer saying, I'm not ready to commit. It's like, what is this, online dating or something?
Happens all the time. I know. And you know, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's important. Yeah. So, and the same thing with the listing agreement. You don't want to have the start date of a listing agreement before the date that the sellers have signed, and before, or putting it into the MLS before the sellers have signed the listing agreement, right? So if we're looking at a listing agreement and the MLS start date and the start date of the listing agreement are before the sellers even signed the listing agreement, then we technically shouldn't have listed that property on the MLS because we didn't have a signed agreement, right? So watch your dates. That's very important. If you have any questions about that, let me know. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't want you to still go back and get those documents. Better to have than not. But if we can get into a good habit of getting those documents in the appropriate timing and signed, if they're wet signed, remember, they have to be dated. So if you take them and they hand sign the documents, make sure that they've dated those documents as well. All related documents are present in the file, signed, executed as needed, filled in, and on the most up-to-date forms. So Tar and Trek have updated a lot of documents in this last year, so make sure that you know that you're using the correct forms. You know what I did? I went on to both Tar and Trek, and I pulled up all their forms, and I right-clicked and I copied what all the current forms are. And next to it, to the right, it gives you the dates. So you always know you're using the most current forms. I printed those out for myself. So you guys could do that as well. Tar and Trek both.
And if you're a listing agent and you get an offer from a buyer's agent on wrong forms, address it then.
Don't sign it.
And don't have your client sign it.
That kind of goes back to what Scott was, excuse me, what Scott was talking to you guys about at the last office meeting. How do you ask the other agent to help provide the correct forms? So your buyer's been provided and yes, I just saw one of these, a 2014 seller's disclosure. You receive it and you look at it and immediately know there's a lot of items that have been updated from 2014 to 2018 and important items, flood, propane, lots. So what do you do with this seller signed seller's disclosure? My recommendation is provide it to the buyer. Say, here's a preliminary. I've gone back to the listing agent and I've asked that listing agent to update that. Don't sign that form. We're not going to sign this one. I just want you to at least have this information until we can get you a new updated form. They know you're doing your due diligence. You're doing your job for them to get them as much information as you possibly can. Now you're going to go back to the listing agent and say, hey, did you know that form was 2014? Why did you use it? Ask them, because maybe they've got a reason why they used it. Maybe something within that transaction, oh, well, I had this listing once before, then it expired, and now we put it back on the market again. Okay, well, we need an updated, seller's disclosure. My buyer needs to have the most current form. Could you please have your seller fill out the most current form and then we'll sign it? That's what you say to them. And, if you have pushback, if you have frustrations, if you don't get anywhere getting that updated, let me know, because I can help you. I've had to do that.
Do we have a document in here that's like an index that shows the most current version of each of the documents? Do we have, just an index?
No.
That shows
No.
the latest date?
You can go to the Tar and Trek website and pull up those forms, right click to print, and it will print you out those documents. It'll print you out, I think it's 4 or 5 pages, and to the right of it, it has the dates of the most, yes, yeah. No, I don't have those in here, but all of the, in the Trek and Tar, when you go to your templates, these Trek interactive forms, Texas Association of Realtor forms, those are directly linked to Trek and Tar. They have provided those documents to Dotloop. And I know that I used to have to manually add those documents in. And this year, we finally were able to, they were finally able to get the writable rights to put them into their system with Dotloop. So they had finally got that agreement together and were able to start doing that because, yeah, the first of the year and anytime there were updates, not really very fun to be me. So I'm extremely thankful, but those are all the most up-to-date forms. So what I've done is I've copied these documents and put them into those folders, and that's why they're starred, because I want those documents to stay updated. So let's say a new TAR form comes out, TAR comes in here, they change out that form, it's automatically switched out in the folder that I moved it to, because I've shared it into that folder from the main files. So that should always keep our documents updated. If you have a folder in there that doesn't have a star next to it, and you might have an old document in it, it's because you created that folder and you will have to manually update those documents yourself because they won't update themselves. So you could always use my folder, and if you want a different folder, let me know. I mean, if there's something specific that you want me to pinpoint in a folder, I'm happy to do that as long as it makes sense for, you know, for the group. I'm happy to do that. So I tried to get as much as I could. I haven't put together a commercial checklist yet. I keep thinking about doing that, and every time I sit down to do it, it's like, commercial is a whole different avenue. And so I may or may not ever come up with that. We'll see if I get enough people that ask.
Is there a way that we can make those map to specific agent folders? Like I have Ashley's buyer docs folder. Can we pull those over there? Can you
Yes.
do that?
Yeah, and I'll show you how to do that. If you go to the bottom of this page, on any of these pages, whoops, I'm backwards. So you go to the bottom of the page and you hit Help Center. Dotloop has manuals on how to do all of that. So you could go for teams, you can go to an agent. So for teams, let's say that you want to set up well, it didn't come up, so let me go back. So I think what I was looking for, here are the training guides. So if you look down here under tasks, they have tasks and task templates. So you could have basic forms that are set up for a file. And so every time Ashley clicks on to do a buyer file, those would auto-populate.
But that would pull from that would auto-update with
Yes,
the Trek update?
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as you take them out of Trek and Tar.
Right. Okay.
But if you take them out of your own folder that you created,
Right.
then it wouldn't.
Then it wouldn't. We have to start from the big one.
Correct. I see the wheels turning. Yeah. TMI?
No,
Okay.
so they're interactive too, right, when we download them
What's that?
from Trek?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Do you know I used to have to manually do that?
Yeah, and I know that.
I am so happy, you guys. 11 years ago, when I started this job, each and every one of you, and there were 323 of you at the time, would have to
With
send,
Keller Williams.
yes, with the Round Rock Market Center.
Oh, okay.
You would all send me every single document, and I would create a file, and I would review those transactions. So let's say you got a fax. Yes, we used to be in the fax system. You would get a fax and you would forward it to me. Here you go, Mary. Put this in my file. That's what I did. That's how I started this job.
Transaction coordinator and
And yes, so I mean, we've come a long way. And I'm actually really excited to see what Keller Williams is doing, because I have a feeling it's going to be so integrated that it's going to be difficult. You guys are going to make yourselves miserable trying to do it wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because, you know, so form a good habit now. Follow this guideline. This is an easy step-by-step. Follow the guidelines, put it on your desktop, stick it somewhere where you can just look at it. Oh, what did she tell me? Oh, that's right. Oh, that's right, I gotta do this. Or, oh, that's right, I gotta go back and do that. So, you know, if you can do that and get yourself in really good habits now, going forward, when we have to learn the new system, you'll have this down. This will be easy. So I can kind of integrate you into what it is that Keller Williams is coming up with. And just remember, we got the best of the techs, and all of us who have been doing this for years that are helping to create it. So we're force feeding what we need. All right. So what do you think, guys?
This is way better than it used to be.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. And you know, I mean, it always gets better. And I could take you guys further and further into all of this stuff, but you know why? Do the basics. If you can do the basics, stay in compliance, stay compliant. Call us if you need us. We're here for you. You know, you've got Avis and I, and you've got Scott and Kristen. We're all here for you. So if something funky's going on in a transaction, don't try to figure it out on your own. Make a phone call.
Well, thank you so much for your grace and that attitude, because I know I've called you and I'm like, well, I screwed this up. Help me fix it now, please.
Yes. Well, and the most important thing is that we try to fix it before closing, because that's the thing that we don't want. If you wait till after closing and go, help, you know, and title companies, they don't want to touch a seller's disclosure, but they might help us out if we needed to get buyer signatures and initials. And there's a way to go about doing it, and it's, you know, with a lot of, you know, hey, we just can't, you know, and sure, you know, I'll get that for you, but you got to go back and get a copy, because that's one thing that the title companies, they don't want to be sending those out in their emails. So you got to go back to them and say, hey, can I get a copy of that seller's disclosure you had signed by the buyer this morning? You know, and they can get you a copy of it. But I don't blame them for not wanting to be a party to that, because it's really about, it's not a contract. It's about property condition. And so that is really between the buyer and seller. Yes?
And just a little plug, the system that Mary's talking about, as far as what it will look like in the future, Scott and I are doing a class next Tuesday, so you get a peek of what that command system is going to look like and how green sheets are going away. You won't be able to get a deep dive, but at least you'll get a visual idea of what she's talking about.
Yeah.
It's 4 hours, but it's 4 hours of fun.
And are you going to video that too? Will that be mainstreamed? No?
I don't think KWRI allows these to be video.
Okay.
They don't want the competition.
Oh, yeah. Got it. Right.
Whatever Tuesday is, I believe it's the 12th. It's on the Market Center calendar already.
Crystal, will this build on what you covered last time, or is it restarting over again? Because I couldn't come to the last one.
It changes all the time. As the technology changes, these presentations change. So when did you come last one?
Yet,
Okay,
no.
so yeah, I would definitely say stop on by.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
It's on the calendar, thank you.
Yes.
During the team meeting or?
I think it's in place of the team meeting from 9 to 4.
Yeah, I did. They sent me the tech ones for yesterday and let's see, Wednesday and Thursday. So they let a few of us into the command and let us play around with it, looking at your contacts and how to pull your contacts in. And I mean, it's going to be directly, you'll have it attached to your Facebook. I attached mine to my Facebook page, and it was like kind of freaky.
Yeah, that was
I was there Wednesday and Thursday. I was in those training video.
very cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
I love it. I'm a nerd like that, but you guys,
Yeah.
I'd say it's definitely worth the time if you can come so you can see what the future of this is going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great. Well, thanks you guys for coming. I appreciate it. All right. Have a good morning. Oh, thank you.
I'm on my 21st.
amazing.